So once again, thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate you guys all taking time out of your schedules to join us today. I hope you found the content useful so far, and we're really excited about the next session. I'm pleased to be moderating a panel with our sales professionals as well. To be honest, I probably couldn't have asked for a better introduction actually from Barry's session, because I think he covered off a lot of the key points that we're talking about when we're coming to sort of sales enablement. Now, he sort of discussed that traditional stereotype of sales complaining that marketing's, the leads from marketing aren't too strong, and the dynamic of marketing sort of putting their hair out saying that sales aren't following up on the opportunities that have been generated. And I think whilst it's a stereotype, it is it's realistically a concern that does sit in a lot of the organizations we have. I know in our own organization as well. So today, obviously, what we wanted to do was we wanted to actually bring up sales professionals who are in different walks of life, from inside sales right through to field sales, to really sort of discuss, number one, how they're actually working with marketing and how they're actually being successful, and how these organizations are working together within and not too siloed like they once were, as well as obviously how these sales professionals are embracing data, are understanding customer needs, and ultimately being able to have more informed conversations at the right times with the actual prospects. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the guys to introduce themselves. So, James Galvin at Dell, I'll let you do your brief introduction.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks very much for your time. I've been at Dell Technologies, what was EMC, for 4 years. Prior to that, I was at Computer Associates, now Broadcom, so all of the companies I end up working for get acquired, which is great. So what's the next place I end up going to? Really what I care about is making my clients successful. I think that's the main focus for me. I think sales is really around empathy and ensuring that you're focused on other people's goals rather than your own. And I work in the acquisition team in this year, and the top performer in Europe for acquisition in enterprise field sales. So a little bit about me.
Thank you, James. And Andy?
Hi everyone, so my name is Andy Gillies and I'm the BDR manager for RingCentral. I've only actually been there a few months. Previously, I actually used to work for TechTarget. Really what I see my job is to use relevant data and to start relevant conversations with people at the right time, and how my team can do that in the best and most productive way.
Thank you, Andy. And Robert?
So, Robert Shepard with Digital Realty. I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary with the company. And as a BDR for EMEA, I think the importance of good data is key to everything. But with the help of everything that we see, it certainly it helps us enable the sales team a lot better. Fill the funnel quicker, but with more quality leads as well.
Thank you, Robert. And what I wanted to do as part of the presentation today was actually share some research, not only from TechTarget, but I'm not too sure if a lot of you guys saw the content actually coming out from Gartner as well recently about the actual B2B buying journey as well. Now, show of hands in the room, I mean, who is sort of familiar with the stat? I think Serious Decisions came up with it, that 70% of the buying team actually occurred independently of sales. Yep, so quite a few of you guys are all familiar with that. Gartner now actually has it at 83% of the buying journey is actually being conducted independently of vendor sales teams. So when you think about that, that's a huge amount of time that organizations are actually spending away from the guys that are truly obviously having influence as well. So never has it been more important for marketing to really sort of be engaging and working with these accounts, organizations and prospects to really try and create preference for your brand to make sales' job a lot easier. So I suppose to hand over to my first question, thinking about that buying dynamic, guys, and thinking about how these organizations are spending less and less time with sales. First of all, how is that affecting your role? And then secondly, when do you guys know when to reach out to buying teams, and is that a challenge for you? So, Andy, if you want to start first on that one.
I think it affects the conversation greatly, actually, because I think it's quite simple. If you think about it personally, if you've done 83% of research, I don't know, if you're buying a car, if you're buying a house, and then you get someone come in at that last 17% and try and sell to you, how does that resonate with you? I think it resonates with us all in the same sort of way when you've done all of that research. So I think you need to tailor the conversation in a completely different way. You almost need to tailor the conversation that you don't know the information that you know. Almost when you're having a conversation with someone, they tend to think, oh, you're reading my mind. That way in is a much more palatable way when you're talking to people, a little bit more slower. And also going on from that, what you can look at is, if 83% of people are doing that amount of research, when do we as a company actually start that conversation? Can we start that conversation early doors? Can we use information such as what you might get in Priority Engine and actually tailor a conversation early on against multiple departments in an organization, so then they're talking about your brand? Multiple parts of a company talking about your brand leads to the same thing, the people that actually matter talking about your brand at the right point. So that's sort of how I would look at that.
That's a good answer, Andy. And handing over to you, James. So I suppose obviously you're more on the field sales side than the inside sales side. So how have you guys found that impacting your team in terms of being sort of that, your customer being that far away from you for that long?
I think a lot of what is going on in the industry is actually, although a lot of professionals are doing research prior to actually purchasing technology, actually they're more inundated by white papers and all the other sorts of media files that there are out there. And actually it makes it a little bit more convoluted to understand what is the right necessarily technology to work with. And I think it really puts the onus on sales professionals to be more intelligent, do the right thing, and figure out ways to turn benefits and features into ROI and really tangible, outcomes. And I think really it just, talks to more as to why marketing teams and technology companies and any company really should be working with, companies like TechTarget, because, clearly you want to be understanding where a buyer is on that journey, rather than having someone call into a company and annoy someone, as I'm sure we've all sat down next to inside sales people. I've been inside sales prior to EMC for quite a few years. Now, it's never a nice time to make a quite an irrelevant call to someone in a busy day. So if you can be more informed and have that intelligence, I think is really important. But I still think it's onus on the salespeople to be more intelligent, understand how you can turn benefits and features into ROI, and really flip the script. And I think I think that's really my big takeaway from this.
Thank you, James. And I suppose, Robert, being on the front lines, actually sort of picking up the phones, calling into organizations, right? So how have you guys been effective in the BDR unit to really sort of understand when's that critical time to call and how to address that?
Yeah, it's just picking up on something that James said about making relevant calls. Mm-hmm. And I think in the truest form, cold calling is dead. The more that we arm ourselves within business development, the more credibility we add to ourselves as well. And I think what we've noticed is the key that stood out for me from presentations so far is leveraging every part of data that we can. So with the help of TechTarget Priority Engine, we start to understand buying cycles. So you're either too early to a conversation, too late to a conversation, to Andy's point as well. But when you start to see the projected buying cycles, you kind of know where to burn the calories in a smarter way. So you know when to put the best work in, mm-hmm. and when the focus should be on the right calls, when to nurture them, when to hold their hand, and that's how we've been doing it.
No, great answer. Thank you for that, Rob. And then moving on to the sort of the next part of the Gartner study as well that came out, and this really focuses around the fact that how sales and marketing have traditionally worked together is it's more of a serial fashion, right? So marketing generates the lead, hands it off to sales. Now it's sales' responsibility to go and close. I think, Barry brought up a great point on his slide where he was actually talking about how Citrix are now using intent data to actually help them with pipeline acceleration as well. So I suppose, I wanted to sort of get a sense of, with you guys all in different sort of varied sales roles, how are you working with your marketing organizations to be more effective? And crucially, are you working with them in unison at all stages of that journey, from op creation handover to continuing to work with marketing to get that opportunity to close, or is it in that traditional serial handover fashion that sort of Gartner has been saying we need to change. So, Andy, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think firstly, marketing brought me into the organisation. The BDR team at RingCentral, whilst very good, wasn't really working at that point correctly. So marketing wanted to bring me into the organisation. And since I've come into the organisation, I've made it my top priority for my team to be aligned to marketing, because, as I say to them all the time, marketing is ultimately the first line of sales. You might have a different name, but you're sales. And in my humble opinion, some of the work that all the marketing teams that I've worked with, both at TechTarget and also RingCentral, are extremely creative people. And that creativity needs to be championed. And the way you champion that very easily is from a BDR team. So an example of that would be recently sales enablement within my organisation wanted to start doing writing seminars with my team, something that is not my strong point, which I welcomed. But I sort of had a thought that we have an extremely good creative writing team and content team at RingCentral. So why are they not running these sessions? Why is it sales running these sessions? Because if you think about it, the way a marketer would write an email and the way a salesperson would write an email is very different, simply because they think differently. They've got different ways of thinking. One maybe would argue is more creative against one looking at a number and trying to get an outcome from that number. And you can't blame either one, because that's the way it is. So we've very successfully now had writing workshops with Michael, actually, who's over here from RingCentral. And what happens is he'll come in, he'll look at what we write and how we outreach via email. And those sessions have been extremely creative and productive for my team. Now, just in a matter of months, the level of email that we're actually crafting when we outreach to our clients is completely different. And we're actually starting to see a lot more return with the email, which in my humble opinion is the least amount of outreach you should be doing against calling and social media. Simply put, and I know I've rambled on a little bit there, everyone, marketing, as I said, is the first line of sales. In any organisation, you have to see the impact that they bring to the team. And when sales and marketing do not work in unison, the company is going to be at fault for that.
Thank you, Andy. And Robert, I suppose from a BDR perspective, how are you working with marketing? Is it sort of leads handed to you, or is there a lot of back and forth between you? And sort of also touching on another one of Barry's points he raised as well, what's that feedback loop look like within digital realty as well?
It's quite interesting, because I think we're a bit unique in this sense, whereby we fall under marketing. Mm-hmm. So the responsibility to enable the sales team falls with me. The good thing is, and coming from early from some of the questions being asked, being Irish, it's good to talk. So having that open line of communication between both teams is key to everything. Yeah. I'm lucky enough that I sit in the same office with the guys. If I need to ring the other guys across Europe, I can pick up the phone, speak to them, but having that communication, being open to speak to them, what we've seen, it results in accepted leads being accepted quicker, but also qualifying quicker as well to a valid opportunity and showing valid in the pipeline.
Okay, that's an interesting point. And handing over to you, James, as well. I mean, how are you currently working with marketing in your role?
Better now that we're talking to TechTarget, I'll be honest with you. But I think, the elephant in the room is that, sales and marketing usually come at a loggerhead from my history and a lot of the engagements that I've had in terms of actually relevancy in terms of sales, seeing tangible results from the marketing team. And I think that's maybe why a lot of the professionals are in here today, to look at how they can be more relevant. How they can be more relevant to the sales teams. I'm not sure if anyone heard that, but I think one of the big elephants in the room is how sales and marketing can become closer together, and how relevant, marketing teams are to sales professionals speaking as a field rep, right? And I think, the transformation that TechTarget are doing in this space is really, at the forefront of this. This information is invaluable to sales professionals who can be way more relevant to every engagement they have with their customers. That's really it for me.
Yeah, and I suppose, James, following up on that point as well then, so, if for example, one of your marketing team came back to you and said, James, we've seen something else going on at this account. What would be your receptiveness to it? Would you be open to hearing what they had to say, or does that happen in the organisation? I just wanted to get a sense of that.
I think that would be very well received by the entire organisation and myself. Okay. Does it happen? I'm not sure. We are leveraging this platform, and it's a gradual process. But absolutely, if I'm making a call onto CIO, and I know actually that they're also looking at managed security services, for example, with SecureWorks, then we've got a completely different angle to have with them in our conversation. And I think, if anything else, it just helps you be more relevant to your customers. If you can go in there and actually have a conversation with them around their key priorities. Talking from an organisation like Dell Technologies, we have an extremely broad portfolio. This year we'll be turning over 100 billion, which is $100 billion, which is a massive organisation. So our portfolio is really large. So to ensure that we have the right intelligence going into meetings is really crucial. So yeah, to answer your question, if my marketing team came to me and said, James, they've got some other planes, would you like to talk to them about it? I would be very up for that.
Great. And Robert, sort of the next question I really wanted to go on to as well, and I think you touched upon it in your first answer as well, was sort of, how will you receive extra intelligence so you can actually have a more informed conversation with the prospect. So I suppose sort of my question to you as a BDR is, how are you actually leveraging intent data to have more sort of informed conversations with your actual buying community?
I think it's utilizing everything that we do in a way that customized reports that we can get from content syndication, topics like that, from 22 themes, just from everything. And it's making sure that timing is key as well. When you get the report, don't be afraid to make the call. Use it while it is warm, while it's relevant, because otherwise, the time's gone and it's coming back down to this point. You're coming in at that 17%, when the 83% is already done. So, it's understanding where to come in, but it's seeing what we can do with the information, making best use of it, and it helps us massively.
Yeah, and James as well, how are you leveraging data to be more effective with your customers?
So I think, platforms like LinkedIn are really important. But I think, this platform that you've got at TechTarget is, one of the most powerful ones. So really I use LinkedIn for researching key contacts, and enriching the data that we have in our CRM system, which, as all organizations have, challenges with their CRM systems. But really, I think, I use LinkedIn to enrich the data, but TechTarget to really figure out how I can be more relevant to my customers.
Okay, great. And then, Andy, I suppose coming into a new role, picking up a BDR team at RingCentral, sort of how have you sort of addressed how the team are actually using data to be more impactful in the conversations they're having?
I remember we had a meeting before I joined. It was just really to introduce me to the team and to go over a few things. And everyone was chatting for around half an hour. And I sort of kept quiet because I want to analyse what's in front of me rather than have me talking and analyse very little, which sort of goes into outreach. Good outreach, the less you speak and the more the other person speaks, you're on a winner. Half an hour into that call, I stopped everyone and just said, is there a need? All these companies you've just spoken to me about, have they got a need? No one could answer that question. And I think that's really important. And I think this is where tools like Priority Engine they give you the need of a company. Everyone wants to work, I don't know, Dolce & Gabbana. Everyone would love to have them as maybe a client. But if they're not looking at what you need, what's the point in talking to them? It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of my time, and what you're actually going to do is annoy the people you're trying to contact for when the right time to talk to them is. So really that was key for me. Is there a need? Are we reaching out to people that actually want what we're talking about? And then also you need to look at vertical outreach. Not just vertical outreach, we're starting to see turnaround now in looking at people's charity output. And then talking about what we do as a company, because we're quite heavily into charity and what we do with charities. And starting up a conversation, as you mentioned on LinkedIn, very gently around charity. It's amazing how that can get you in a door. So there's so many ways that you can utilize information at a company, whether it be through an intent-based tool or just the work that they do, as I said, in a charity sector or anything like that. Once you have an alignment with someone, it's a much easier conversation. It's the same as, you know, we buy off people we like, we want to talk to people we like. It's the same sort of thing. It's about using intent to find commonality sometimes, and it isn't always about business.
No, thank you for that, Andy. And sort of coming on to the next slide here, and apologies if the font's kind of small for the people in the back as well. I'll summarize it. So this is actually a study that we conduct annually that's called our Media Consumptions Research. And during this study, we actually ask technology buyers, so your potential customers, when they're actually engaging with technology sales teams, right, in the approach, what are the things that turn them off and what are the things that really get their attention? Now, what was interesting as well, represented by the sort of teal color and red color here, are the things that turn them most off on the outreach is, you know, trying to qualify them too soon, in terms of BANT, trying to push for a meeting too quickly before you've earned the right to, and also just, you know, quoting, you know, something arbitrary like, you know, I saw you downloaded a white paper. What actually is sort of really engaging them is when you're actually adding value to the conversation, whether that's, you know, offering them a workshop of relevance to what they're doing, showing an understanding of what their current architectures and infrastructures look like, and then also, you know, maybe offering them something that's like an additional piece of content that's actually going to be relevant to where they are in the journey to really accelerate that process as well. Now, I know a lot of organizations, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you guys are all targeted on, you know, number of meetings booked or number of opportunities to pass through to the sales team. And sometimes that pressure of KPIs and targets can obviously cause conversations to be led in more of a result-centric way as opposed to a solution-centric way. I suppose my long-winded way of asking the question is, you know, when you're actually looking at this research and this data, you know, do you feel there's enough good quality data in your own internal systems to be having more informed conversations with these prospects to add value, or is that a bit of a blind spot in what you guys are currently seeing from, I'm not talking about intent, not talking about, you know, additional add-on data, I'm talking your own existing CRM as well. So James, I'll start first with you on this one.
Yeah, well, we just discussed this just before the panel started. You know, CRMs, every company I've ever worked at, have always been full of lots of data. Some of it is useful, some of it is very unuseful. And actually, the complexity that you see with having a huge amount of, you know, irrelevant data means that you can't really see the value from the madness. So I think that's a real big challenge for us sometimes. And you know, we were talking earlier, I don't understand why TechTarget isn't, you know, transforming into a CRM organization, because clearly you've got more data than a lot of organizations, sales organizations. You know, I do think there's a lot of challenges with, you know, maintaining CRMs and having those integrations. And, you know, clearly, you know, organizations such as yourselves are making big strides in this space. But yeah, I think really, you know, to answer your question, no, we don't have a huge amount of accuracy. You know, I specifically only need to, we need to fill out a medic, which is you know, we don't use BAN. I haven't used BAN in 8 years. I don't think it's relevant anymore. Medic is much more of a detailed way of understanding and qualifying opportunities in the 3 whys. And, you know, this is from the people like Jeremy Duggan at PTC that started this whole sales methodology 20 years ago. So yeah, I think there's a big transformation going in CRM. Hopefully Salesforce will be disrupted soon and I can have something a bit more useful to look at every day.
And I suppose, James, sort of following on for that as well, so in terms of your outreach, so when you're actually outreaching to prospects, I know we obviously speak about it, you've got a hefty revenue number on your year from the accounts you look after. Do you feel that tends to dictate your approach in terms of being quite, you know, trying to push for the meeting, trying to push for that, or do you think you need to really add value to that conversation earlier?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think no one's ever going to admit that they like a pushy person that got into the door, but I don't think any salesperson who's, you know, done 400-500% of their number has not been pushy, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But it's about being intelligent with your pipeline generation. You know, an activity drives outcomes still. You know, more dials equals more outcomes with more intelligence, of course, and informed decisions and informed and calculated business development. What I think is, really important though is, to your point earlier, is around, finding relevancy. A lot of the times, sales professionals will call into organisations talking about what they want to talk about rather than what the customer actually needs and what is going to drive them to be successful. People buy from people, yes, but people buy stuff that's going to make them successful, and they're not going to buy anything else. If you think it's might, turn the needle ever so slightly, there's going to be other things at the top of the pecking order. So what I would encourage people to do is just figure out and empathise with the people you're reaching out to, figure out what is most important to those people and execute really well with that. And for example, sustainability is probably one of the top charity as well. The higher you go up the food chain, people like to give back because it's a nice thing to do if they want to go further up the food chain, regardless of whether or not they think it's a good thing. Sustainability is that next big thing, right? And Dell Technologies is one of the best organizations on the planet. For sustainability, we recycle more ocean plastics than any other organization, and we will be carbon neutral very soon. Most, if not all, of my organizations that I talk to are really focused around that. And the old adage of going to the annual report, and one of the big pieces in an annual report nowadays is sustainability. One of my clients is trying to go carbon negative, in fact. So actually, does it make them more successful if I can execute on that rather than selling them something which is going to save them 5% in their storage costs this year? Not that I just sell storage.
And Robert, coming to you. So obviously being a BDR, working inside the sales organisation. First of all, it'd be good to get an understanding of how you're KPI'd personally, and then obviously, what is the sort of approach you take to sort of engaging with these type of prospects to try and add value.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as a BDR, we're targeted with calls. And the big thing for me is I want to be armed to make those calls. I don't want to be making cold calls. Just get a dial, leave voicemail, hang up. I want to add relevancy to it, like these guys were saying. And that's a key word. It's adding relevancy to it. I think everybody knows that CRM can be full of gaps. So what we've seen through different applications, but certainly with Priority Engine as well, it does become a source of truth when it comes to data in the right way. You're not always going to get everybody on the first call. And like the guys were saying, LinkedIn, social selling in the right way, it can be a powerful thing as well. Certainly in the BDR world, you start to understand the workings of it and bringing credibility to everything. It just enables the sales team in a better way.
No, thank you, Robert. And Andy, over to you. I know this is a slide near and dear to your heart from your TechTarget days, but sort of running the team now at RingCentral, have you got them sort of adopting this approach in terms of adding value, and sort of what were some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome to get this sort of methodology in at RingCentral?
I think, yes, to the question, that they are using this methodology. I think, first of all, I echo everything that you've both said. It's very hard going third to think of something else other than what they've said there, because everything's bang on. I think what I see is we talk about aggression and how sales can be aggressive. There's nothing wrong with aggression. It's intelligent aggression. Where can I be aggressive to get the right outcome, but at the same time come across as very gentle and consultative? That's the key. Now, the aggression, I believe, comes in your cadence. So what I said to my team straight away is, I don't mind that you're cocky, I don't mind that you're aggressive, but you need to be aggressive in how many times you outreach, how many times you throw the net around a company. Break down the company into organizational departments. Make them all start talking about us, RingCentral, as a company. It's not that hard to actually get people to follow that road, because, yes, you're right, we're targeted against KPIs. We will have to hit a certain amount of meetings per month. But anyone that's got half a brain cell at some point will realize that when you target people in the right way, it doesn't have a negative effect on your numbers. It only has a positive effect on your numbers. And once people see that, they want to jump on the boat and they want to come, they want to come along with you. Anything in life's the same way. You can have a great methodology on anything, but you have to show people how and why that methodology works. And I think that's key with my team. I was lucky with my team. I went in many times with TechTarget. They saw me do what I do, so they were already bought in by the time I got in. And now they're following that, and they're seeing some success that they weren't previously. So good news, good news.
Perfect. And Andy, nice segue, because you're sort of taking me on to my next point here. I think on Mike's slide, he showed a case study of how operatics were calling into intent data versus cold data. And I think it was 17 calls it took to engage with a single technology buyer, which is, a huge amount. I think we measured it a couple of years ago at TechTarget from our surveys at about 13. HubSpot came out last year and said it actually takes 18 calls in order to engage with an IT buyer. So I suppose sort of handing back to you on that, Andy, I mean, one, do you see that as being a fair stat? And two, how are you actually embracing that challenge, if you see that as the challenge? Are you building cadences, and are you using different types of outreach like email, social, and phone in order to sort of make sure you're being impactful and getting in front of the buyers?
I 100% agree with that number. I'd actually suggest potentially it's more. If you average it out, it's very rare now that you'll get hold of the person that you want to get hold of. That's why we want to speak to influencers. That's why we want to speak to the people that are actually doing the research, because most the people that we want to speak to are enterprise companies that they're probably not going to take our call. But if you can get the people below them speaking about your product, then they'll start maybe taking your call. So my team have a monthly cadence. We have a cadence that's 70% calling, 20% social media, and 10% email. We heavily are now moving into a more social media consultative outreach. I'd say around 20 to 25 touch points, Jap. So we've got a few more in there. It's very aggressive, but we make it a little bit more smoother by the way we influence and integrate calling against social media, against email. We deliberately go in at key points of the buying cycle with key relevant information. And also, most importantly, we just had this conversation outside actually. We used to email like massive documents, pages and pages of stuff. And if you look at that, great information in there, but who really reads a 10-page document? We don't do it. We might read the first page, we might read the last page, but we don't read it all. So there's a whole load of information in there that our clients or potential clients are missing. Whereas if we actually broke that down into 5 separate emails, targeted them in a different way, and then looked at what they actually opened and read, gives my team a much better conversation going in. So in short, yes, that number I would suggest is higher, and yes, my team now have a cadence of 20 to 25 touch points across multiple outreach methods.
Yeah, and Robert, I suppose sort of as you're saying, your first line on the phones, right? I mean, are you finding it tough to get hold of people? Is that a day-to-day challenge? And sort of what sort of tactics are you using in terms of your outreach to make sure you're engaging with prospects?
It's 100% what Andy has said as well. It is tough. 18, probably generous, but I think seeing more and more on the social side as well. And I mean, there's a great quote that perseverance is stubbornness with a purpose. Mm-hmm. But I think it's that stubbornness done in the right way. To these guys' points, it's how you do your cadence to the point where you don't want to annoy them, you don't want to get blocked, you don't want them opting out of emails. So it's doing it in the right way, making sure it's relevant, but certainly it is, I would suggest maybe a little higher.
Yeah, and Rob and Andy, I'll play this back to you two in particular, because I think, I've been in meetings with a lot of marketing teams where they'll say, well, there were 5 calls. We made 5 calls, and now now it'll be closed lost by sales or inside sales. I mean, looking at your own numbers, your own teams, how different would your numbers be if you gave up on prospects after 5 touches?
Yeah, but it would be totally different.
Yeah.
Certainly, there would be huge changes in the reflection on that. But it's just, I think it's being creative in how you do it as well. Okay, that's what it comes down to. You know, knowing who to target, when to target. Everybody knows you will get sometimes that one lucky call where you catch a guy in between meetings, maybe, whatever he's doing, maybe on a lunch, maybe on a coffee break, and he'll agree to a call to a meeting. That's great. Doesn't happen every call. And sometimes the sales guys seem to think, oh yeah, you know, you've got the luck. Yeah, give this guy a call. You know, I'll expect to see a result in an hour's time. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
But I think definitely, you know, there is a big change in it, and I think that's why you start to see the shift in how it's done as well, with the different touch points to what these guys were saying, with a big focus on social, definitely, and maybe a slighter drawback on the email side.
And I think Andy, you sort of already answered the question. He's at RingCentral, they've got like a 20 to 25 touch cadence over the month. Just asking openly and honestly for sort of the leads followed up with, how many of your organizations would say that you've got above 15 before you'd close loss and opportunity?
I found this interesting. When working with TechTarget, I was in a job role where I had to go in and work with other people's BDRs teams. And sometimes it was amazing. I've always openly said working with someone like Robert was always an amazing thing because he's very good at what he does. He understands gentle consultative outreach. Then you have the other side of the fence, which is you have to work with people and go and try and change that mentality of how many times you outreach. And some people just haven't got the time to make more than 5 calls. And so many times, Jack, I go into a room and someone would say, no, that lead's bad. Or why is the lead bad? Well, I called into that 4 times and no one picked up, so that's bad. How many times did you call into that 4 times? Over a week, 2 weeks? No, a day. Okay. Could the person have been on holiday? Could maybe the person was sick? There's so many reasons that suggest to me, in my mind, logically, that you're wasting good information if you don't outreach properly. Priority Engine is a fantastic tool, but it's not a fantastic tool if you don't know how to utilize it. Look at what Citrix have done with the tool. That's how you utilize the tool. That has to be, for me, the whole thing. You can have the best data in the world. If you don't know how to use it, you might as well have the worst data in the world.
And I suppose, James, in your role where you look actually after key accounts, you know, I suppose for the ABM marketers in the room or people who are in charge of trying to market to key account lists, I'm always quite baffled actually by the level of meetings James is able to get. It is with those time-poor people at the top organizations out there. So, you know, James, it'd be sort of helpful to understand how you go about locking in meetings with CIOs at some of these Fortune 500 companies, as well as obviously how you're leveraging data in order to do that as well.
It's not easy, to be honest with you, but obviously my manager hears that quite a lot. So, you know, especially in my end of year reviews. But, you know, to be honest with you, I'm a student of sales, you know, and I pride myself in my emotional intelligence, and I read a different sales book or try to read a different sales book every month. And really, you know, I think your win probability goes up by 20% over 10 interactions with your client. And that not necessarily is cold calls, but that is in terms of activity with your clients. I think, just to answer your question around cold calls or calling in general, I don't think, you know, any call should ever be a cold call. So I think that whole term should just be taken out of the sector. And if you're still talking about cold calls, you probably shouldn't be in this profession, I think, because, you know, there's so much information to make your conversation relevant nowadays, to enrich the conversation. And to Jack's point earlier, you know, why would you want to have a conversation with someone about something which isn't relevant to them? Like, it wouldn't enthuse me. I wouldn't expect it to enthuse someone else. And if it's not going to enthuse someone, you're never going to get some action from it or a buying decision. I think in terms of how I get in front of the C-suite, I mean, use every technique under the sun rather, like, you know, and I'd like literally anything, you know, and that's camping out and start out, you know, in my customer, Q4 will need that sometimes. But, you know, I think just being really creative, and I think people forget sometimes around, you know, taking the time out to appreciate the receptionist, you know, and I think, you know, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, right? Know the receptionist. You know, I don't think I've ever been I don't think I've ever done a deal without giving a box of chocolates to the receptionist, for example, or something like, not Brian, but it's a box of chocolates. But I think and I've got my own specific methodology, right, which is a cadence of calls, emails, LinkedIn's, and we don't have enough time to get into that, but it starts with LinkedIn. I think before any of your sales professionals reach out to anyone, introduce yourself on a really nice, friendly platform like LinkedIn that everyone can see who you are, your credentials, because in a time that we live in today around cybersecurity and threats around the exterior of your business, I wouldn't give anyone information over the phone if I don't know them, because that could be used detrimentally against my career or my person.
No, thank you, James. And sort of wrapping up now, because I'm concerned with time. I suppose sort of thinking about the takeaways. I mean, my takeaway from the panel for you all guys in the room is you've got 3 different salespeople here from different walks, different stages of sales, and they're all talking about how they'd embrace data. They're all talking about how they do embrace data. They're all talking about how receptive they would be to marketing to be able to provide them with data. So I'm hoping if we've achieved anything from today, it's helped to remove some of those stereotypes that, there's a division between sales and marketing. The sales guys up on this stage are all very successful people, and they've been successful people through embracing data and working with marketing. So I'd love for you guys to all try and take that back to your organizations. But to finish off, I'm going to let you guys all leave the room with 2 key points. So James, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think the 2 areas that I would, tips-wise, I'm going to do 3, sorry. But I think one is, set up a WhatsApp group. I know someone in here was from Slack, sorry. Set up a WhatsApp group if you don't have a Slack account, and have that with your sales teams, right? Just to have a bit more cadence. It's a bit more, takes email, it's less emails. It means your sales team's actually going to read it, right? And it's a bit more of a team, fostering a team culture. And I'll keep it to 2. And I think the other piece is, really, I don't know any reason, unless there's a really compelling reason as to why you're not a customer of TechTarget, you should be. This information is extremely, that's right. This information is invaluable, and if you take this stuff seriously, and I'm sure the people above you take this extremely seriously, and in terms of the results that you make, having, really intelligent information to be used by your sales teams is the most important thing.
And Robert, two key takeaways?
2 key takeaways. It's open line of communications. Remove them and us mindset and embrace a one team. That's certainly the culture that we have. As a team, we sit right in the middle of our sales team, really. And it really has helped a lot. Get the sales guys involved in campaigns. Get them participating in what the content should be, who the target audience should be, who they want to do it to, and let them drive it, so that all we're doing is we're just going to hit the button and send it, but this is your campaign, so you're responsible for it. But I think that's a big one, is get involved, open line of communications. And
Andy, over to you.
I think every organisation I work in, the one question is, how can marketing always work better with sales? So my tip is to flip that on its head. How can sales work better with marketing? I think that's quite key. And I think if you can get to the root of that question and you can get that answer, I think you'll have harmony. I think there's so much creativity, certainly in this room, certainly with a lot of the marketing teams that I've worked with at TechTarget, and certainly with the team that I'm working with now, that's getting missed, that's getting lost. So that's the first thing. How can sales work better with marketing? I think when you do outreach, I listen to a lot of what you said there, James, and I think my preferred outreach is always selling through curiosity. If I can get someone speaking more than me, it's a good call. It's a good outreach. So they're really my 2 tips. How can sales work better with marketing? And curiosity. Curiosity is always a great thing. It gets you to the truth. It gets you to the conversation that you need to be having, rather than the conversation you think you should be having.
So guys, thank you very much. And before I sort of ask for a round of applause, James, you need to send us that chocolate box brand as well to get the CIOs engaged. So I would like to see that. But guys, please join me in thanking the panel today, taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. Thank you very much, guys.